Okay. Might as well get this done and over with, even though it's going to be a waste of time. Hey everybody, Nitsa Gamer here for part 2 of my Sonic... Hey everybody, Nitsa Gamer here for part 2 of... Okay, can I at least get some Crush 40 awesomeness so I can get this out of my system? Thank you! Now back to Rise of Shit. If you watched my video last week, then you know I despise this game as much as everyone else does. Except for the Omniverse posting. How? Regardless of the game being a huge missed opportunity, it not only misses what made the original Sonic so great, but it ironically works against what the TV show has set up. If you haven't seen my last countdown on the worst things in this game, I would strongly recommend you to check that out before you watch this video. With that said, why don't we go vice versa on this game and talk about the best stuff in this game. Now, be sure to let your obnoxious Canadian give you his clarification before you assume I like Hedgehog of Steel. As some of you may know, I did do a countdown on Sonic 06 talking about the good stuff in this game. And not only do I stand by these picks, but I think people have taken the rare subject matter really maturely. Either proven that Sonic 06 is not as bad as most people make it out to be, or it just shows the fanbase is a lot more mature to see a whole different argument. I mean, sure, there are people who actually like this game, even though I personally hated it, but it's nice to see that the fanbase is a lot more mature than we're given credit for. And I want to be able to acknowledge 7 good things in Rise of Lyric, but here's the problem. It was impossible for me to find 7 legit good things. There are a couple, but even then, nothing that seemed well developed or properly optimized in comparison to some of the good stuff I picked from Sonic 06. So because of that, calling this a good list would seem rather unfitting. So instead, I am going to look at Rise of Lyric's best moments, or at least not as bad content that makes the game somewhat tolerable. Maybe it's because it's too recent that finding good stuff is too soon, or maybe it just shows that Sonic 06 did better despite its major flaws. So as much as I know this is going to be a waste of time, I might as well find the positives in the turd of Sonic. So without further ado, let's talk about the top 7 best things in Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric.
It's alright, take a chance, 'cause there is no circumstance that you can't handle. When you lose your eyes, Sonic moves you home. Sonic moves. Sonic speeding through all emotions. Sonic boom.
Number 7. The visual design. Okay, there is a reason this is very low on the list, and that is because most of the designs in the game are quite bland. And yeah, while the graphics do look like something from a PlayStation 2 or a crappy license game, honestly, I'm not one to judge graphics. It's not great, but at the same time, it's purposely meant to be like that so it meets the tone of the TV series. The only downside is when you don't have Weedo and Big Red Button working together, then the universe becomes inconsistent. So why did I put the visuals on the list? Well, honestly, in comparison to Sonic 06, the designs are better. And no, not in terms of graphics, but the layout in the environment. Which, yes, while the stages in Sonic 06 had a unique design to them, using photorealistic graphics and having a wide open space of realism, the hubs in the game I found were completely bland and felt like something in a beta. In Rise of Lyric, however, they take the advantage to add details to the levels and even the hub worlds themselves that you are in, making it look somewhat unique to admire the nature that surrounds you in the game. Despite how bad Bygone Island is, I will admit the inside of town is quite well designed. For the most part. Nothing visually unique, but it does pop out more than any city hubs in Sonic 06, whereas the outside I will definitely say needed more work. It might also would have helped if they added more NPCs to make the town look more alive, but considering how large this entire hub is, it's probably way more than the game can already render since you do experience a lot of frame rate and rendering issues in the final game. The research facility that you go to does have decent detail to it, it just gets repetitive when you're spending most of your time dealing with the combat in this game. Or heck, some of the forest you are exploring on ground, you can see the individual detail they added to make it look more lively. To me, it seems like the best designs in the game are usually the ones that show plant life. I also find the beginning of the ocean purification plant kinda neat as the visual effects of the sun hitting the ocean floor does stand out, and it does look like you're walking through an aquarium. Or Crater Lake for example, the run-in section looks like you're about to enter into an epic stage with lava and a volcano that could erupt at any second.
Dormant. It's dormant.
Honestly, Amy, I don't give a shit. But then again, once you get to the main area, that's when it suddenly gets lazy. And yes, I know this bullet point is a sloppy start, but as I said, finding good stuff in this game is nearly impossible. So it's a half and half opinion when it comes from me on whether or not if the visuals are decent. Some stand out, some don't, some are unique, some are bland. I would be lying if I said there was more good designs than bad, but some designs did actually stand out more than Sonic 06. The rest, however, could have definitely used some more work to make it look more lively. Heck, even if you look at the concept arts, the potential of what these worlds could have become looks pretty dang amazing. Even that bland area in Crater Lake looks kinda nice, but in the final game it doesn't look that well designed. But if I have to be honest about the good stuff, it's not really an inspiring setup.
For once, nothing is chasing us. Just take a minute to soak it in.
Sorry Amy, but the concept art makes this place look more like a masterpiece compared to actually being here. Not great, not good, definitely not inspiring, but at least they could bring detail to what unfortunately became a mess of a game.
This place needs a makeover.
Number 6. Replay value. Okay, I don't want to put myself in the position to go through these stages again if I'm facing up against those goddamn robots. And even if you do collect everything, the only reward out of all this is really the bonus stuff at the thingamajiggy and the concept art that you can unlock in the Quincy database. But it's nothing that's worth getting 100% for. But to the game's credit, I'd much rather have collectibles than try to get A or S ranks in every stage. I mean, sure, you feel more accomplished by showing how good you can be at a stage, but really, was getting all A or S ranks in a Sonic game really that fun? I mean, don't get me wrong, Sonic Adventure 2 is still my favorite Sonic game, but I've never been able to 100% it, because of how hard it was getting all A ranks. And with a game as bad as Sonic 06, I didn't want to put myself in the position to get all S ranks, even if it means buying all those gems. In Rise of Lyric, since the levels are long and don't require a time limit to get to the end, our ranking system would be unfair, so its replay value has to be on the collectibles you collect and might miss if you don't look in every corner. You have to explore every part of the world if you want to 100% the game, every chest, every crown, and later in the game, shinies. Now, the interesting thing is that the game gives you a reason to play the last 4 levels after you find out what the footprints on the ground are for. So, in a way, it does add replay value that you never knew existed before you got to the halfway point.
You give me shinies, I give you princess crowns, okay?
Now, of course, yes, I don't want to put myself in the position to collect everything in the game, as I don't have the tolerance for what I had to go through before. But there was one thing I did complete, and that was the side quests in the game that earns you the power glyphs for helping certain NPCs in the hub worlds. Are they fun side quests? Hell no. Are the power glyphs useful? They might be. I mean, I did use at least 2 of them during my Let's Play on this game, but even then, it's easy to forget that they are in the game anyway. For as repetitive as these side quests may be, I'm glad that the game has at least some sort of replay value. I'd rather play a horrible game with stuff to do rather than a horrible game with no replay value at all. But even then, that doesn't necessarily make the game good as much as it does give you a reason to play more for something, which in the end is really nothing. Take it for what it's worth, even if it's not much.
Do you want to try the Great Mystery Race?
Why do they call it a mystery race? What's mysterious about it?
Great question, son. I have no idea. They never explained it.
Not sure this is a good idea.
Number 5. Solid gameplay mechanics. One thing you've been hearing a lot in this video is me comparing this game to Sonic 06. And with how both games are considered the top 2 worst Sonic games ever made, it's hard not to. The gameplay was without a doubt the worst part of Sonic 06, and in comparison, Sonic 06 had more broken gameplay as the gameplay is riddled with glitches and tedious moments. In Rise of Lyrica, on the other hand, I've never had an issue with the gameplay, and any moments that did occur is because of how unpolished the game was. While Rise of Lyric does not have the variety that was given to us in the team gameplay of Sonic Heroes, each character still had their own unique abilities to help you progress further into the game, leaving nobody totally useless. For the most part. Knuckles has the ability to dig underground and climb on ruby red walls, geez, say that 5 times fast, which now I can't blame him for wearing all that tape on his arm. Now, for as useful as this ability will be, he'll definitely be your least used character unless you're somehow able to use that unintentional infinite jump glitch that you cannot perform now. After all, that was the most important thing to get rid of than the serious issues. Sonic might be your most played, even though his attacks are just basic kicking, stomping, and homing attacks that I didn't discover until like the 3rd way through the game. But he can also go up ramps with the spin dash, use the homing attack on orbs to get to other places. Basic, but definitely more fun than Knuckles. Tails was the character I used the most for combat, as he can throw lasers at the robots while also sending his body bots out to help attack the enemies as well by suicide bombing. You know, for kids. Plus, with his ability to fly with his 2 tails, it's hard not to avoid using them when it came to platforming. Amy, however, was probably my most played character because of her ability to triple jump, making her much more easier to control when it came to platforming. Tails was fine and all, but I felt Amy was able to make her landings better than any other character could. Plus, her moves are probably the most stylized with her acrobatic skills to balance on pink beams and swing on poles. Though she was probably the character I used the least when it came to combat, as it was mostly just her swinging her hammer around and nothing else.
It's not the size, it's how you swing it.
The size of the hammer just swing.
Yeah, whatever.
I got nothing funny to say without making this inappropriate.
Okay, that's enough. Let's focus here.
Each character did at least add something to the game when it came to what they were skilled in. And while the combat portions didn't have much variety like Sonic Heroes did, although to be fair most of it was enemy rushes which was quite annoying, it was mostly just repetitive strategy rather than broken gameplay. And unlike Sonic 06, I did find the gameplay in this pretty solid for the most part. Do I wish they gave Sonic more speed? Hell yeah. Or give more variety to what these characters could have done? Absolutely. But for what they have, it's a decent setup that does work. You just have to deal with this game's bullshit rendering. Ugh, fuck you, game.
I can do this all day.
Number 4. The boss fights. For as repetitive as the combat is in this game, I will admit that I barely had much to complain when it came to the boss fights. I mean, they weren't great or anything, but I thought they were fairly decent. Each one had their own unique ways of attacking, and every fight did have a strategy to what you had to accomplish in order to defeat the bosses, without it just being button mashing. As much as I hated how much of a whiner they made Shadow in this game, I did have a decent enjoyment fighting the boss himself. Sure, it was mostly button mashing, but it was button mashing at the right timing, as Shadow did have a variety of different attacks, making himself vulnerable only at certain moments. Which does beg the question, how can he manipulate Chaos Control if there's no indication of Chaos Emeralds existing in this universe, let alone that he even has one in his hands? Regardless, it was a decent fight, even if there was the frame rating issues here and there. And even Metal Sonic, again, frame rating problems, including obstacles that you would run into that's not even there, but despite that, I did find Metal Sonic to be somewhat decent to fight up against. And Dr. Eggman probably has the best fight in the game, since I had more of a challenge fighting up against him than the actual in-game issues.
That just happened.
Even the fight against Lyric is not so bad. It's nothing as massive as it should have been, but he does combine both the challenge that we had when fighting Shadow and bringing him down like the fight with Dr. Eggman. And yeah, there's also the tunnel bot from the ocean purification plant, but I really don't count it as a boss. Although if there's one boss that I did find annoying, it would have to be the gigantic worm that you fight up against in the pit. And I think my biggest problem is that it's impossible to dodge every single time he slams his goddamn face on the platform. Well, the fortunate thing about this game is that you don't restart a scenario when you die, so really, losing any of these boss battles is the least of your worries. With the exception of Metal Sonic, I did find myself dying a couple of times, but not because of any frame rating issues or bugs, but because it was a challenge, as boss fights should be. May not be that great or even that good, heck, I can understand if you hate these bosses, but the boss fights are definitely better than the speed sections, the exploration, and the combat in this game all combined.
I'm out of there. Just clear the back. Ah, got it. Nice scar, losers.
Numeral 3. Lyric the Last Ancient. Now, to be very clear, I don't think he's a good character. Not at all. And if I did have to say at least 2 other characters that were better, it would have to be Tails and especially Dr. Eggman, who was hands down the best character in this game, as well as the TV show. And the only downside to both Dr. Eggman and Tails is that they have no development, but they were better than anyone else in this game. However, when I first started this game, I wanted to give Lyric a chance, so I left myself an open mind to see where they would go with this character, as he did look pretty cool at first. But in the end, Lyric does end up becoming a generic villain with no good payoff. However, I will admit he did have a good setup to be a great villain. Now, many of you are probably confused as either A, you never played this game yourself, or B, you watch Game Grumps and could only hear, hey, it's a cutscene, let's talk over and laugh like a bunch of drugs. Sonic is so bad. But Lyric did have a decent setup, and one that can be interpreted in many ways, which is great to make you feel sympathetic for the character. And if you saw my worst point on Sonic, you know it kinda worked for me. Over 1,000 years ago, the Ancients set Lyric up with the task to harness the power of the Chaos crystals. But after Lyric gets sick from the job, they find out that no organic medicine can heal the damage that has been done to his health. So because of that, Lyric has blamed the Ancients for not having him aware of the consequences, and that he had to build his own tech suit in order to keep himself alive. Now, there's 2 ways you can interpret that backstory. One, the Ancients might have been aware of the consequences and never warned him. Or 2, it's just Lyric looking for somebody to blame. And for the fact we never see it does leave open possibilities. Many could argue this as an unanswered plot hole, but sometimes it's best for us not to know the answer, and therefore the only thing you can work off of is what the villain himself has said. We'll never know what was in that briefcase in Pulp Fiction, but for the sake of the movie, it's best for us not to know, as it gives the people more of a reason to evaluate the possibilities of the unknown. Lyric is kind of like Lucifer if you really think about it. Heck, he's even a snake like in the Garden of Eden. He wants to wipe out what he hates the most. And the Ancients themselves are like the angels that come down to stop him. And even though Sonic did go to the extreme that ruined his character, a threat has been stopped, even though I argue this would make matters worse when he does get released again. I mean, Jesus Christ, he only builds one of these big robots in a matter of who knows how long, and in a matter of a day or so, he builds an army of these things when he gets released. Which, by the way, am I the only one who notices these robots have wanes on their... seriously, what the hell are the names of these robots anyway?
Sir, it appears one of the Maya units has gone rogue and taken control of the Sentinel.
Well, thank goodness the Sentinel's name was only mentioned once.
What? How?
What makes Lyric have a good setup is that it all comes down to him being in unfair circumstances and using blame that ultimately becomes his hatred for all that are not responsible. And since he's partially a cyborg, he sees himself more as a machine than he does a snake, as it's the only thing that keeps him from dying. Now, on the one hand, yes, it's really hypocritical since he's an organic life form himself, but sometimes hypocritical reasoning is not an uncommon thing for extremists. If anything, this is kind of like his suicide wish. He wants to go Terminator on our asses just because he sees more value in technology and that organic life is what holds things back. And let's face it, we are very dependent on technology. So much so that elementary schools are now using tablets rather than paper. We're often thankful for what we can have rather than what we got. Lyric represents that extreme of our pride. The extremists that refuse to accept a balance between nature and technology and sees the balance as too hard for him to comprehend because of his misfortune. Finding it easier to blame one side than accepting the reality that life can change on you, and that change can happen when least expected. And yeah, while it could have been more developed, I think the backstory he gives is enough for us to understand his motivation and reasoning. Some might see this as convoluted, and I'm not gonna act like I don't see why. The only major thing I would complain about is that they never develop his character any further after Lyric's weapon facility, leaving you with not only a controversial scene with Sonic, but a villain with a good setup being reduced down to a generic villain. The best thing they could have done is give him a dilemma or a thought of his actions in the final act of the game, but instead, the story just comes down to him making him look like the most evilest thing in existence, resulting in an overall boring villain. And while I haven't played Shattered Crystal, it seems the continuity is botched, so there's nothing consistent when presenting this character. And I know the TV show has no continuity between its episodes, but I feel like they could have worked more with this character rather than making him a tool for Sonic and his friends to go up against. But what makes Lyric stand out is his setup, which is a great idea, but a terrible payoff. Lyric is probably the fourth best character in my opinion, so if Dr. Eggman is number 1 and Tails is number 3, who is number 2? The number you see on screen. Lyric's overall character was a terrible payoff, which in a way is why I personally like Quincy more. Unlike Cliff, who we barely get to know much about, we do get an idea of what Quincy is like. However, what he's told to be in the game is not what we got in the final product. He was supposed to be your guide in the game, almost like what Omochao was in Sonic Adventure 2. Heck, even a line from Sonic proved that was supposed to be the original intention.
How do you just keep appearing out of nowhere?
Yeah, man, I mean, you appear everywhere we go in this game. I mean, you appear by Cliff's tent, beside Cliff's tent, near where the broken biplane was by Cliff's tent, and Cliff's tent. I mean, holy crap, do you have teleportation powers or something? Because if so, that's pretty awesome. Though, to the game's credit, it was probably best that they did scrap that role, as he would probably wear out very fast and be more annoying than Omochao himself. But for what he's limited to in the game, I think is enough to understand his character and what he chooses to do with his life. Quincy, the anthropomorphic robotic unicycle, was created in the ocean purification plant by Lyric himself as his trusty advisor. However, just like Maya, Quincy doesn't want to work with Lyric because they have no reason to destroy organic life forms.
Activating gratitude. Thank you.
At one point in the game, Quincy tries to insist Lyric to warn people of what is to come, And it's not until after Lyric gets imprisoned by the Ancients, thanks to Sonic's dickish move, seriously, I'm not going to get over this scene, that Quincy wants to make up for his evil deeds and live in peace among people. And as seen in the game, he becomes one of Cliff's excavation crew after Cliff finds him during the excavation. Now, yeah, it's one thing for a robot character to like organic life forms and live among them, but what makes Quincy stand out is not only for the fact that he wants to help people, but more in the idea that he wants to be like other people. Whenever he's on screen, he seems to have the habit of acting like a physical humanoid being. From the mouth-dropping expression, feeling the fear of Lyric's rage, twiddling his fingers, not being grossed out when he sees robot parts, and for the fact he uses awesome and cool at the end of his sentences.
Because I am awesome. And I fit into vents. Hey, Cliff was looking for you. He still should be around the end of the road. Make sure you look for him. He has something cool to show you.
He even uses it in sentences you shouldn't end it with.
Use these pads to jump high into the air. They work awesome.
Who the hell talks like that? I guess you could say that is bad writing, but honestly, when you really think about it, maybe the point was for Quincy to say something we don't normally say, but something that a computer thinks we say. If anything, having him use words like awesome, which we use more than we think we do, makes him feel more like one of us. And yeah, for as short as his appearances are, he does at least contribute to something, arguably more so than Cliff. The first time you beat him, he guides you to the first crystal. The second time, we find him reluctantly working with Lyric 1,000 years ago. The third time kind of happens out of nowhere in the ocean purification plant, but he does state that he was created here, so it gives us more of a backstory on where Lyric created him. And the fourth time is during the final level of the game where he actually does help you. And not just cheer you on and say, you have my support, but actually help. Me, I don't want to deal with these robots again. Whoa!
Take that! I closed the door. I did something! I closed the door! Was that good? Did I do good?
No, Quincy, you didn't do good. You did awesome!
Yeah, we're best friends.
I think what makes Quincy the second best character in this game is really for the fact that he not only wants to be like an organic life form, but proves to us that despite the differences, both technology and nature can be diverse if both can benefit each other rather than just off each other.
I think I can help, cause we're best friends.
In the end, I won't necessarily say Lyric or Quincy are that good as their purpose is botched one way or another. But I really do like how they could give them both development with what they could give in a game full of bland characters. Lyric may not have been that fully developed, and Quincy may barely have his appearances, but they definitely have more to offer than any other original character in this game.
Yeah, we're best friends.
And the number one best thing in this god-awful game is... the voice acting. Okay, let me make one thing clear. Just because a game or a movie is bad does not mean that makes the actors bad actors. Especially when they're putting all their effort into their character more so than the writing itself. For as much as the majority of the dialogue is painful to listen to and the in-game conversation scenes are awkward as hell, you know what? The voice acting for the most part is not bad at all. Is it superb voice acting? No, but then again, has voice acting ever been emotionally perfect in a Sonic game? Not really, but even if it's not that great, it was passable. But as far as this game goes, the voices do match with the characters and the stereotypes they represent. All the voice actors for our main characters and even our villains are all perfect as the characters they portray. Roger Craig Smith as Sonic, Travis Willingham as Knuckles, and especially Mike Pollock as Dr. Eggman. They all do a great job.
Look out for the new Sonic Boom coming soon!
And yes, I even think Patrick Seiss does a great job as Lyric. Sure, he sounds stereotypically evil, but hey, he can still sound evil, and for the most part, I think his voice acting is really good. I especially love this laugh Lyric gives when his suit starts to fail on him. I don't know what it is, but I kind of like that moment. Plus, hey, Patrick also did the voice for Salty, who is a stereotypical sailor.
Ahoy, mateys! How did your adventure go?
And guess who else he voiced? Such an overrated character. Actually, it's Zamam. That's right, the stereotypical fat food-loving member of the Deadly Six, and Lyric is the same English voice actor. Honestly, I can listen to these 3 different characters and think they are voiced by different people.
Hey, I forgot the mustard! Be right back!
Let's see what 1,000 years in prison will do to you.
Say what you want that Patrick Seise's voice and stereotypes, if he can do it right, he can do it well. And his ability to voice Lyric is at his best as he can express anger and even insanity. Hell, if Lyric was in the main series, this character would probably be downright insane, and you know what? Patrick would be able to pull it off. Even if the character is not that well developed or even that intimidating, Patrick does a great job with what he is given. And yes, even the side characters are great. Again, most of them barely have any character aside from being a stereotype, and you know what? All the voice actors do their best to breathe life into them. And unfortunately, they had no idea that this would result in awkward animated conversation scenes, as they had to perform what was written and directed for them way before this game got into the animated stage of development. That, and of course, they wanted their paycheck.
Boy, hello! It's you guys! I saw you guys earlier fighting Lyric. It was awesome!
Look, Mom, I can speak like a human being. Can I fight against Lyric now? Don't sweat it, Hayward. I'm sure your parents are happy standing around in the same spot. You will put a smile on Percy's face. And yeah, speaking of Percy, if I did have to be honest, Percy's voice actress, well, she doesn't do a bad job, doesn't sound so convincing. And for the most part, I'm just aware it's an actress behind a microphone. I mean, maybe it's because of video game logic how she claims to be a warrior, and yet she does jack shit throughout the entire game.
I've been the only one who prepared for him. My family has been protecting us for decades. We are the only ones that do anything.
But yeah, even though Percy is not convincing, I think every other NPC, for the most part, has a voice actor that captures their stereotype.
Not so fast, Sonic.
However, if I did have one other thing to complain about, it would have to be Kirk Thornton's performance as Shadow the Hedgehog. And truth be told, I don't know what the actual problem is. I mean, as you might remember, they reduced Shadow into a pointless bully for no reason, which I greatly despise. And because of that direction, it makes Shadow sound a little too sincere than a character you're supposed to like. And the end of his sentences are often stretched out, making it sound like a kid at recess who's trying to play an evil villain.
Looks like you and your friends got the job done. Saving the world. You, not bad. You're weak. And you know what makes you weak? Your loyalty to your pathetic friends. I'm gonna show you just how weak you are.
That's right, Sonic. You shall not show how weak and pathetic I am, except when I show how weak and pathetic I am. However, I don't know if I should blame Kirk Thornton for this, or if it was really more of a sign of bad direction. And the reason why I'm more open to the idea that it's bad direction is because Kirk Thornton has done a lot of good work. He also does the voice for Orbot, Leroy the Turtle, and T.W. Barker from the TV show. All those characters he does a terrific job at. And he also voices Cliff in the game, which he also does a terrific job at. Shadow, on the other hand, was probably bad direction. But hopefully that doesn't hurt Kirk Thornton's reputation too much, as he can sound like the guy, he's just not very convincing for the role. So yeah, I think it's safe to say it's unfair to put the blame on him. It's like blaming Samuel L. Jackson for his bland performance in the Star Wars prequels when, hey, the guy is a really great actor as proven by his other performances.
Not bad.
So while Percy and Shadow both had bad direction, I think the voice actors are the closest people to bring these characters to life than the writing itself. Even if they had to do the worst, it's great to know that they will provide their best. And yes, this is sadly the best thing in Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric. And so that was my top 7 best things in Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric. Doesn't it just make the game so much better? So yes, you can see what I mean when I say there's barely anything good in this game. Everything I mentioned in this countdown does not make the game any better or more tolerable. If anything, it angers me more knowing that there could have been potential for a game that is half-assed. Actually, no, I take that back. Half-assed is too nice of a comment. Nothing about this game is redeemable. Everything is poorly optimized and rushed out the door just for the sake of getting money. Which, hey, definitely became a big sale, didn't it, Sega? Look at those amount of copies you sold. It's not like any internet could spread any word faster than Sonic himself to tell people not to buy this game. Millions bought it. And you know what? They loved it so much that they took a shit on it. Which is a fetish that for some reason people do, but rightfully so! This game had no passion. They just took ideas that sounded great and assembled it into a shit cake. Sure, there are worse elements in Sonic 06, but if that game can have redeemable qualities and even a minority that loves this game, that's gotta be saying a lot. Rise of Lyric is so awful that even the biggest Sonic fan couldn't defend this game, and the ones who claim this to be good are lying to them fucking selves. You don't even need to be a Sonic fan or even a gamer to realize how bad this game is. If anything, Sega and Big Red Button f***ed this up more than they ever could. With the sins of the past, you would think they would get the memo on what creates a great Sonic game so that way they don't go down this road again. And with such a great reputation gained from Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations, they decided to cut corners and release this game just for the sake of not wanting to work hard enough, and therefore it destroyed their reputation further. I'm sure there are plenty of people who worked hard on this game, but who's gonna want to put this game on their resume? The TV show has a lot of flaws, but at least it has some smart people behind it, treating their audience as both kids and adults without rushing it out as pure filler for kids that even kids would find boring. I'm not gonna act like everybody can get into the show, but it's the only Sonic Boom related thing I would recommend outside of buying the toys. But you want to know what the most painful part about all this is? Is that Stephen Frost tried to defend this game without acknowledging its obvious issues. While he stated that the show and the toys were a success, he believes the #1 reason we hated this game is not because of how it strays from the speed and action that we love in the original Sonic games, or not because of the frame rate and issues that are here and there, or not because of the god-awful writing, but because they were too ambitious while developing Rise of Lyric. Is there really a point to all this if I'm just gonna have the same ending as the worst countdown? I mean, how can you defend a game like this when I can't even say anything good about it?
Well, at least you tried.
Yeah, well, it's do or do not. This game has destroyed me.
Yeah. Not like your student loan is a big issue, right?
Shut up. I just don't know how to end this countdown. What is the point of making a part 2 if I'm just gonna leave it off with disappointment?
Well, why don't you check your email?
What?
Yeah, go on the computer and look at the attachment.
Okay, I guess. This is ridiculous. Wait a minute. How have I not realized this before? I got it. I got it!
So, who sent that email anyway?
Okay. Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric is an awful game. But it's a good addition to the Sonic franchise.
What?
For as much as this game gives you every reason why not to like it, there are some valid attempts made by Big Red Button to make this Sonic game not only unique, but quite arguably a worthwhile experience. I mean, if you think of every best point that I have mentioned on this countdown, those are really more of the qualities of what the creators would hope would stand out. But then we have our reasons on why we hate the game, which botches the intended experience. There's some solid gameplay mechanics, but the overall combat was repetitive. Some visuals stood out, but the poor frame rate and rendering gets in the way of us being invested in the world we are exploring. Some characters are not so bad, but then there are characters we find insulting because they are a sudden change in what we are used to. If anything, it lacked balance because Big Red Button tried to make this game unique by adding all these concepts and ideas to make it quite as large as the Sonic Adventure games. So yeah, from a developer's point of view, maybe Stephen Frost was right. Maybe ambition was the main reason for the game's poor quality. It was an experiment that went horribly wrong, and it ended up being something we couldn't get into. And with Sega forcing the game out sooner than it needs to, that also became a huge problem as Sega probably needed the money after their serious financial struggle. So it could be possible that Sega knew this game was going to be bad, but they decided to risk their reputation in order to save the company and the employees it has left. And in the end, it almost destroyed them. I mean, sure, this game might have been a spin-off, but because it plays like a main series game, we treat it like a main series game, even though it's not. We're never gonna know what the intentional experience was, but no one ever decides they just want to make a bad game. If anything, what's kept Sonic alive is that he's tried new things. I mean, if he was always kept to the same type of gameplay, it would get boring very fast. Sonic can stick to his original roots that we love the most as long as speed and platforming are his core mechanics. But if there's nothing for the series to evolve with, there's no innovation or experience worth our time. Sonic Boom tried something new, and while Shattered Crystal just ended up becoming boring, Rise of Lyric failed as a balanced game. So, for as strange as this may sound, the number one good thing that came out of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric is that it was a failure. Like a balance between nature and technology, failure and success are two sides of a coin, but both are needed for an art form to evolve. Sonic can gain a good reputation by succeeding and lose it by failing. But where success makes us feel great, failure is a learning experience for both the creator and the publisher. It's the creator's responsibility to convince us that this illusion is worth getting invested in, and if the final piece fails to deliver us the intended experience, it's our right to criticize it all we want so they are aware of the flaws. Rise of Lyric has opposite extremes to what made Sonic 06 bad, and because of that, it allows us to see how a game can fail in so many different ways. This can be used as not only an analogy of how to improve future Sonic games, but it's also a learning experience for everybody. Whatever Big Red Button moves on to next, they probably learned more about how to balance gameplay concepts and ambitious intentions. Sega can use this to see what not to do for a Sonic game, and with its poor sales, it will make Sega realize that delaying a game for polished quality is worth the time and patience, as word of mouth can spread faster than the Blue Blur himself. And with Sega delaying Sonic Boom Fire and Ice for a year, that's gotta be a good thing because they learned from their failures. And for the fanbase, I agree to the negative criticism, and we are entitled to our opinions as it is our right to say what is not okay. But if you're just gonna use your hate on this game as a reason to say Sonic is dead and it ruined your childhood, that's just being arrogant and stupid, as Sonic games have failed in the past. even before the 3D Sonic games. It's a game that failed, but in the end, we move on to hopefully better games because the flaws in this one particular game are acknowledged. The only reason we feel like this should be a big deal is because we make it to be. Sonic hasn't been getting better or worse, he's just changing. And just bear in mind that Sonic Boom is a separate universe that is separate from the main series, so it shouldn't really be that big of a deal. And while I do recommend the TV show, there's really nothing in Rise of Lyric that makes me say go buy it, but if you're curious to try it for yourself, go ahead and play it. No one can stop you from doing so. And who knows, maybe you might be able to find something worthwhile than I could. And if you like this game, tell us why. Maybe we might be able to learn something we never considered before. And maybe Fire and Ice will be a decently good game. It could be bad, but if it does improve from Shadow Crystal's flaws, then it's because of the impact made from us to push Sonic in a better direction. Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric is an awful game, but it's a good addition for our learning experience because failure will lead towards success. I am Nitsa and... wow. And for the first time, I am glad to have played Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric.